Welcome to Positive Filter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Filter. I'm joined by a special guest. Everyone's a special guest because they take their time to join me on their show. I'm joined by Miss Flor Dorsely Moore. Flor Moore, you know what I'm saying? That sounds so good off the tongue. And we connected on LinkedIn. She followed my podcast, Positive Filter. And we have a lot of intersections between higher ed, career development, and coaching. And so I wanted to get her on the podcast. You know, I definitely love when people want to engage with my audience and share a little bit of things, best practices, tips, suggestions with the listeners. So before we get into this episode, particularly in your career coaching aspect and career development and all the like, can you give the listeners a little background on who you are?
Yes, thank you so much, Phil, for this opportunity as well. I like to call myself a diversity, equity, and inclusion recruiting advocate. Right. So it is imperative to me that I work with, underrepresented groups, as they call them, sometimes marginal groups, the underserved, the under-realized, the underdog. That's me. OK, I want to work with people who have been, really marginalized and pushed to the side for a long time. And now, we're getting a chance to kind of step up to the table, if not create our own table in those places and spaces where we didn't think that we belonged before. So one of those big places is in remote work. I really think that, our latest pandemic, has really created a space where there's greater opportunity, but it has to be intentional. There has to be infrastructure. There has to be investment. And so all of those things require intentionality, on both parts, employers as well as the job seeker. So I'm here to kind of present some of my, best resources, tips, tricks, facts, things that have worked for me for over 20 years to work in this space.
So let's go back to the origin story. How did you get into this work? Where did this passion for this work, particularly, the serving the underdog, where did that start?
I wanted to always be, a resource to people that I work with. So I was always the person that somebody would grab and say, hey, take a look at my resume. What does that, say to you? Or is there anything I should change? So I consider myself a little bit of a wordsmith. So I could finesse, what they needed to say, maybe in a more professional way. But I also felt that there was a greater calling because I wanted to do more than just help people with their resumes or give them tips on their interview and kind of, help them that way. So, slowly but surely, as more and more people got out that I do what I do, people started asking me if, I would do this, and it started taking up more time. I had to start to charge, for the things that I did. And, I started working in career services when my children were young. Mm-hmm. So, I had about a couple of years before my children were born, working in executive search on Wall Street. Right. Everybody wants to be financially stable, including our communities. Mm-hmm. So the lure of working in finance is real for our people. They really want to be able to work, and everybody. But, certainly people that have not had that gravitate towards that. So it was the same for me. I wanted to work in finance. I wanted to work on Wall Street. I wanted to, see that big paycheck come through. Mm-hmm. And I did well. But then, even in that mode, I still felt the pull of family. And I wanted to give that its proper attention. So when my children were little and I was working at an executive search firm, a boutique firm on Wall Street for Japanese banks. So you can imagine it was like 24/7.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We were recruiting all the time, literally, because when they were asleep, we were supposed to be awake. And when they were awake, we were supposed to be asleep. So I had to step back from that. And so that was my entree into career services on the higher ed side. And I worked for several different institutions, private PWIs. I worked for a more career focused online school.
Mm-hmm.
I also was a adjunct professor for an online college in Colorado. So
Mm.
my background is very diverse in this space, but through it all, I was helping people meet their career passion with purpose. And I really enjoyed doing that, pretty much at all levels of their career journey. So I've worked with executives, like I told you, through,
Mm-hmm.
headhunting. And then I've worked with early career people, interns, all right? People looking for their first job out of high school. I even worked at a high school for 9 months. I came running back to higher ed.
Okay. Yes. All right.
But I've worked through all of those different iterations, and it came to my website, CareerWise Solutions, that I launched this year. So excited about that, other avenue that I can continue to help people.
So what I'm hearing is that you're used to this, like I'm thinking about like Bane, Born in the Darkness. I'm used to this. So this world of remote work or working across distances was not new to you, because particularly
No.
you said you were working with Japanese clients.
Yes.
Then you're working at a school that's in Colorado, but I'm assuming you weren't in Colorado.
No.
So talk about that, the earlier years of remote work and how that has shaped your thoughts on it and how you were kind of ahead of the game in regards to before COVID and the uptake in remote work.
Thank you. There's a space for people of all different backgrounds, nationalities, races, certainly, and, different age groups. Like, nobody knows who you are behind that screen. They're looking at your results, right? So I was definitely, one of those people that was like, I need a job. I need to be able to support myself. And I don't have a lot of time, but I know that what I do has value. How can I provide that to anyone, anywhere? So even back in college, I had a job that I was writing content for they call it a vintage candy manufacturer and seller. So they were located, I was in school in one part of Jersey and they were located in another part of Jersey, and they would send me my assignments and I would type up, if you have a skill. So I'm just going to say, if you want to be in remote work, you not only have to have a talent, but you have to have a skill. That's a different level, right? So we all have talent. I believe everyone is born with talent. But it becomes a skill when you refined it and you're known for it. You're good at it. Maybe you're not known for it, right? But you're good. You're so good at it. You've refined it that people should know about you. So it makes no sense that you're the best, I don't know, basket weaver that exists and nobody knows you weave baskets, right? So that's where social media, that's where platforms like this, that's where finding someone that knows about you, right, to pay you for what you love to do fits in. And that's where those career passions intersect with purpose. Right. So I knew I was a good writer. I knew that people had paid me before to do that, in college. And so I started thinking, okay, so where else can I apply these skills, but not be limited by geography? So in addition to being really good at certain things, right? And it might be writing for me, but it might be, evaluating something data wise for somebody else. It might be, whatever it is. I had to also think, how can I do this remotely? How can I not be bound by location and still be able to deliver what they're looking for? So that's when a lot of these video, right, platforms, I'm familiar with all of them, okay? Yeah. Because I knew that I needed to be well-versed in the platforms and the materials that would allow somebody like me to do their job. So that holds back some people. They don't want to learn something new. They want to use what they have always been using, and it's not going to serve them if they really want to be in the remote space. You have to be open to being your own tech support, right? You have to be, you're shaking your head, so I know you know what I'm talking about. You have to be willing to try something and learn something on your own and not be afraid to maybe make a mistake here and there, but then have that gaining of that knowledge and that extra platform that you didn't know before, that extra digital tool that you didn't know before, that extra way of being able to collaborate that you didn't know before. All right. Because by the magic of technology, we're now doing this podcast and we're not in the same place.
Yeah. But what I'm hearing too is one, obviously the intangibles and also the world of how you promote yourself, like how did you get connected that first job across states of Jersey? How did you know to get that remote job? Or also for certain people, how do they advocate that they're like, yo, I don't need to be here. I could do just as much or have deliverables from home. How do you teach someone either one to look for it or two advocate for that capability?
Okay, let's break it down. There's a couple things in there.
Yeah.
So first, yes, I definitely recommend that you put yourself out there as best as you can within the networks that you know. I can honestly say that if not 90%, almost 100% of the jobs that I've gotten in my life, I've gotten through networks.
Mhm.
I've gotten them through networks. I've gotten them through either somebody who knew me already, who promoted me, or somebody that I, got to know through a platform or through an event that I did. Nobody came knock. I can tell you 100% of the time, nobody came knocking on my door and say, hey, Flor, I got a job for you. Nobody.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Okay.
once. Not once did that happen to me. Maybe it happened for somebody else, but it didn't happen to me. So I did have to put myself out there. And you can still show that you have the facility to work remotely as you're going through the process. If you're not in those remote spaces, how will people find you?
Mm-hmm.
How will people find you? So you have to be in those spaces in which remote work is talked about, in which remote work is done, in which remote work is advocated for, okay, in order for you to really be seen as a person who can work remotely. So it's commonly said, you are the sum result of the 5 people that you hang out with. If nobody that you know is working remotely, it's going to also be a challenge for you to really see this as a reality for yourself, right? So I definitely put myself in those circles. I joined remote groups on LinkedIn. I went to Facebook groups and I saw what people were doing, and I just connected with recruiters that were looking for remote people. I made sure that I was connected with those companies that are hiring for remote jobs. And then you have to be clear about what your outcome is. You will not hit your destination if you don't know where you're going. So have that destination really be clear. I was very clear with myself. I not only wanted to work remotely, I wanted to work in a way that gave me the freedom and flexibility to do the type of work that I love to do. Because otherwise, you're going to find all types of remote jobs. And maybe it doesn't matter because you're just getting practice and working in that way. But then you need to really refine what types of skills and talents that you uniquely bring to the table that can be offered in this space, because there's so much opportunity there. There's a lot of things that aren't being done remotely by people like us right now. That's what I see anyway.
Well, I was about to get right into that because one thing I've noticed and one thing that shows up is that remote work takes access to technology. Access to technology is not always afforded to those without privilege. There is an equity issue. For instance, when remote work uptake or remote learning, there were students that didn't have access to broadband internet. So they were if they had to go to school, they were going to the McDonald's parking lot and connecting to the free Wi-Fi so they can do their schoolwork.
Yes.
So can we talk about the inequities or the challenges of remote work on different identity groups?
Yes, definitely. It exists. It's true. So here it is. Business has an imperative, right? Has a very strong drive to innovate and to diversify, because they can't keep selling to the same market. It gets saturated, right? So that's when you have to expand your market. So whatever it does, whatever the motivation, they need more. They need to be able to access as many people, as many quote unquote consumers as they possibly can. When they realize, oh my gosh, you know what? This is a true problem. Didn't the schools reach out? A lot of schools were able to connect with providers to give them access.
Chromebooks, free
Chromebooks. There was all kinds of technology that was being given What was it altruistic? Really? Let's be honest. These are going to create customers.
No, they were. I agree. For the school situation, they knew that if they wanted to keep up as a school had a standard of learning, particularly Fairfax County, a public school, and they had a standard of learning, and realizing that students were falling behind, having lower test scores, it was in their best benefit to provide these resources to elevate all the students, thus making the county look good. So
that's right.
You're right. There is a win-win. There, is it 100% altruism? No, but take it what you got. Take
that's
it
right.
when you can.
Whatever gets us there.
Right.
So I definitely have seen where the right argument being presented to the right legislators, to the right philanthropists, to the right. So I'll give you a story. I was working as an internship coordinator. Actually, I think at that point I was the assistant director of internships at Drew University. And I would see students coming into the office that needed to do an internship because they just didn't have that career path to doing their career that they wanted to do. And the moment I started talking to them about the fact that these internships were unpaid, their face would change. They would look like, oh, this is not possible for me. I have to choose between a job where I'm trying to help my parents at home and doing an internship. There's no compare. I can't do it. So I had enough of those conversations with people of color that I went to my director and I said, listen, this is an access to education issue. This is not us trying to do something special for a small group. This is Drew University having to step up and say, what are we going to do to really support, especially when now we're slowly going into the space where internships are required for graduation. How can you require something that is not feasible for everyone to do?
Yes.
Just like you said, right? It's an access. So I was invited and she was like, we're working on it. We're going to do something to, make sure that we provide resources and we have to network with more employers that are providing paid jobs and so forth and so on. So I said, okay, let's work on this together. I was invited to a donor luncheon celebrating some of the biggest donors that we had at the university. And the place was packed. It was a table. It was like fancy linens. It was, silverware. Okay. It was crystal glasses. I was like, wow, they made a mistake and they brought me up in here. Do they know? So I was seated next to a woman and, they were announcing various awards and during our meal, she asked me, what do I do? And I told her, I manage the internship and federal community service program at Drew. She said, oh, that seems interesting. Tell me about your work. And I said, well, really, my biggest headache right now is that I don't have enough money for some of these interns that are coming through that don't have the resources. I need money to help these people to get the internships that they need. And she said, really? And I said, yeah, it's because I know who I'm sitting. I don't know her specifically, but I know that this is a room full of donors and I've never seen her before. So I'm assuming she's a donor. So I'm telling her what money needs I have. So a little while later, they call the next award recipient and she gets up and sure enough, she was a donor. She was receiving a lifetime award, something, because her dad was a banker before he passed away. So I was, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. She, before the dinner was over, said, I'd love to meet with you for us to talk about your problem and how I might be able to help me and my foundation. Well, long story short, after that meeting that we had, the second meeting that we had for coffee, she wrote me out a check for $10,000 to help start an internship fund.
Yep.
And before I left Drew, I was in charge of over $300,000.
Yep. And what we do, we have that similar program where we have an unpaid internship scholarship. So if a student gets an unpaid internship, we still support them by giving them a stipend.
Yes.
Meaning we eliminate that barrier for that. And so it's a win-win because then a student is doing an internship.
Yes.
And then a win-win for the organization because they get interns to do work. Yes. Unpaid because they get the unpaid scholarship.
Yes.
And then it's another win for those that have money to contribute to that unpaid scholarship fund.
Yes. And for the university to be able to have, your product is the student.
Yes.
Right.
And
that
success stories.
That success story feeds you as well as them. So that it's a flywheel. It feeds on itself, because then their success builds hopefully more donors. Right. And the whole circle begins again. So, we really have to look at this access, because it exists. This access to education is something that is not just a Black problem or a brown problem or an urban problem. No, it's a problem for everyone. Everyone, all people in this country should be productive and should be able to contribute their talents and gifts and skills in a way that makes sense for the whole entire whole. So that's kind of how I see that. And I've been blessed to be a part of different organizations that are doing that. Like, I can talk to you about my involvement with Jersey STEM. I just started working with them. They are a nonprofit organization that works with middle school girls in inner cities, Newark, Camden, to continue their love of STEM, because we know that statistically in that age group is when it starts to drop off at schools. Their interest starts to drop off. Their test scores, their performance in those fields. Is it because they're not as smart? No, of course not. We know there are all types of social things that happen at middle school age. So Jersey STEM sets up girls clubs that focus on STEM, run by college students that look like them, that come from their communities, to help them to continue that pursuit of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So, I'm all about organizations like that address a need and start early and really see, what can we do with the business side and the education side to connect, people with opportunity. Because that's all we are. We're people, and we just happen to come from different backgrounds. Where is that opportunity for us in the remote space as well as on the ground?
Yeah, and I love this topic of the remote space, because it's just sparking my thing. Because I read an article recently that said that Black people love remote work more because there's less instances of microaggressions. Meaning, like you just told me earlier in this conversation, being able to turn your camera off,
yes,
or just like not deal with some of the actual physical environments of normal workplace.
Okay.
But then I can also hear both. So yes. Can you explain, in your lifetime of remote work, have you felt like a little bit more inclusion, a little bit less
yes and no
systemic barrier of in-person work? Because I would say my personal thing is that, like, it's been kind of like, I like hybrid. Like, I like to see people, but I realize, like, there's a little bit of systemic protection in a remote world, because I get to work in my environment. Yes. I get to work in my home.
Yes.
I can turn my camera off. I don't have to deal with some of the extra BS that exists. So, but the pros and cons is isolating,
yes.
So can you speak to that?
So I feel like, okay, you have to look at sometimes the industry that you're in. There are some industries in which having more freedom and flexibility is a status thing. It's just, it's known. So, but back in the day when I was still working, I don't want to date myself, when I was still working, early on in the remote space, no company wanted to be known as they didn't have a physical location, and a beautiful one at that, with all glass and chrome and shiny and, multiple floors. And like that was the status. Now it's more so how flexible and how much liberty can you give your employees to be able to do the work that you do. And those employees have the most status when they have the freedom and flexibility to choose. So it's not something inherent about working remotely, but it's something about having the flexibility and the freedom to choose your space and where you're going to be working. That's what is really the attraction, is what I'm finding, So it's not so much that people are working, on site versus people because some people like to have the on-site option and not be 100%. What I'm finding is generationally, the younger people that have been forcibly remote for the last few years, they want to be in close proximity. They don't have that frame of reference of not enjoying being forced to be commuting and in a particular space. They don't have that. So they want to be on site. So really where the future is to me is hybrid. If an organization and a person can show hybrid flexibility, then you've got the best of both worlds. You've got the best of both worlds. So remote, is a big deal because for companies, they save money as long as they can really provide those opportunities that people are looking for. But you also have to be aware of the isolating factor because you can be isolated. Is it a must? No, because I collaborate a lot every day, all the time. But you have to have access to those tools. You have to have equity and inclusion in your everyday practices, because if not, you can lose people. People are losing people now, right? It's a war. It's even more of a war when you don't see that person. How do you engage them if you haven't had those types of remote engagement practices in your normal mode of operation? So now the person is removed, and we have managers that are struggling. They don't know how to do that. I had a remotely distributed workforce that I was managing when I was at Berkeley, my position prior to where I am now. And as a senior director of a career services team that was all over the state, right? I still made sure that I had time with my individual person, because that is so rare and so difficult to do when you have people all over, but it is what sets the manager apart from other people. If you feel like you're just going to fill a hole, have a person do this job, and then forget about them, you will lose that person. You will lose that person. So, making sure that things that don't have to be done in a meeting and can be taken care of in an email, please don't waste my time with the meeting if the update is really just an email, right? Provide me with an asynchronous way to communicate and collaborate with folks so that I don't have to be on during specific hours. That way the time zone doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So there are specific things that I would, recommend that somebody do if they really are going to be working in the remote space, that helps them to be intentional about their interaction with specific people and their team, so that they don't get lost and feel like they're totally disconnected, because you can still have that without being in front of somebody.
Do you, from your experiences though, and going back to it, do you believe hybrid or remote that there's opportunities for more psychological safety in those spaces as opposed to in person completely? Because I would say this, like I said, for instance, being that I'm bringing my work home, being my quote unquote authentic self, having this hybrid, if it's in the right space, there is opportunities for more psychological safety. But it's like you just said, where even in a remote space, I found my people and still connect well. But I also can hear what you just said too, is horror stories where in, out, they never connected. Maybe they have a toxic work environment, hybrid regardless, or someone's like emailing them at 3 a.m. with the expectation to have it done at 6. So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. So I'll give you an example. There's another organization that I'm working very closely with. I just helped their head of people. It's called Move United, and Move United works with basically providing recreational activity for all people, regardless of their ability. So the head of people, her name is Carrie Ortiz Miller, very good friend of mine. Carrie is a 3-time gold and silver medalist in the Paralympics Games. And her big thing is she is also a military veteran, award-winning veteran. So she didn't let her disability, and she has a physical disability with her legs, stop her from achieving great things, not only in work, but for her country as well. So she is part of an organization that looks at that, but looks at it through a recreational lens. Like, let's at least get people to see that they can enjoy their life through sports. And what can we do to also include them now in, once we've gotten them to enjoy that part, in career development, right? So she's got this internship that she's just launched for people that are looking to do things. You know, there's a lot of people that want to work in sports marketing. There's a lot of people that want to do sports management, right? But how about doing that for organizations that look at this particular population? So this is where you do get, I think, a lot of challenges with people not feeling that they're equitable, that they're being treated in an equitable way or included, right? When you have a disability that might be not thought of on the employer side, and they're trying to be in the remote space too. You would think that would help them, but sometimes the way that things are structured is not equitable, right? So if you're going to be doing a webinar, do you have transcripts up, right? So that people can see live transcripts. You know, are you able to provide the visuals in advance for people that have, you know, vision issues? So think about, you know, all of the different types of people that could be working in this remote space. And I see them as all having the opportunity. Again, intention, investment, infrastructure has to be there. It has to be there.
And that will create a more equitable environment, but also a more psychologically safe and inclusive, and they feel like they belong there.
Yes. And I would also say the economics of it are also there. There's data that supports these are people, these are groups, these are environments that are more successful in business.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's what I see. Yes, definitely you want that psychological safety, but you know what? You can be psychologically unsafe pretty much anywhere.
Right.
Right. So you have to have someone who is thinking about these things and acting on them in a way that's intentional, that provides that investment that's needed, because you might have to pay. But really, accommodations, they've done multiple surveys. ADA accommodations normally do not cost really hardly anything for a company to provide them. So there's a lot of resources out there. If an organization really wants to serve, you know, people that have hearing disabilities, or people that have sight or impaired vision disabilities, or people that have physical disabilities, there's all kinds of adaptive software, adaptive technology and equipment that can be provided. You just have to want it. So that intentionality has to be there. So the infrastructure is set up. How do
you, particularly in this remote work, how do you coach young professionals or new professionals on advocating for that, for themselves?
Yeah, let's say early professionals. Let's just remove that whole young thing.
Yeah,
let's remove the word young. Let's remove that word young, because you're right, because there's a lot of people that are coming into a career. Look, I changed jobs. I'm gonna be 100, as they say, right? With you, I changed jobs in the middle of a pandemic. Right, from senior director of career services to a senior specialist recruiter, basically position, last April. I am not young, but I am early in some ways in this space.
Early in a new industry, got it.
In a new industry, I am changing from you know, one side of the table basically to the other. Do I have transferable skills? Of course. You know, do I have interactions? And was I a de facto recruiter for a lot of these small businesses that came to our campus? Yes. I was. I was their HR, right? But I still see myself as an early career changer. And yes, what I tell them is, I like alliteration. Everybody who knows me knows this, right? So you have to have relationships. Right. When I told you, how did I get my last jobs? I'd say 90% of my jobs, it's through networks. So building those relationships is key, right? Having the right relationships will help you very much so that you can have those informational interviews, so that you can be keyed in on those jobs that are not yet posted, right? This didn't get posted yet, but when I hear that, that's like music to my ears, okay? That means that you're getting in there before anybody else. It's kind of like a pocket real estate thing, right? Now, you know, if you have something that nobody else knows about, guess what? You're competing with no one.
Right.
All right? So those relationships are key. Relevance. Check your resume and see what is relevant about the role that I'm going for that's on this resume. I don't believe in general resumes. I just don't. People aren't going to like this, but I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to tell the truth right now. Okay. Every job that you are going for that you really want, you better tailor that resume. So we have relationships, we have relevance, we have for the role, and that resume has to look like that too, because that's the door. Right now, I have not seen a job yet that will hire you without a resume. So you're going to need to work on that tool. That's your foundational tool. Now, should you have an online presence as well? Of course. If you're not on LinkedIn, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's how we found each other.
That's how we found each other. All right. Yeah. You know what I mean? So there's opportunity there for sure. And not just in the job section of LinkedIn. Let's talk about the feeds, right? Yeah. I have over 15,000 connections on my LinkedIn profile. I built that over years.
Okay. I'm trying to get goals. I'm at 8. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm at 8. You're at 15K. You know, okay.
But a lot of those people are recruiters such as myself. They're hiring managers, right? They're HR professionals. That's my business. If I don't have a good connection, a good network, then I'm not going to be able to help my people that I'm coaching. I'm not, because I don't know my business. So you have to look at those platforms, those tools, your relationships, your resume for the role, and the relevance that you bring with it is what people are looking for. I think that's what I would give in terms of advice, making sure that you are honing those all the time.
And then lastly, that advice, though, like just being advocate, like knowing, like when you go to these organizations that assume to have money, assume that like, hey, I know you got money. I need certain technologies to do well. Like, so would you tell someone to like how to sell it is to say what value, if they provide tools for you, what would you be your outcome for them?
100%. 100%. Like, oftentimes I have been the first or the only person of color, if not, first or the only woman in a team. And so I always say, I'm going to produce extraordinary results just by virtue of who I am and what I'm bringing to the table. It's a different perspective. It's a different background. It's a different mindset. It's just different, right? So I might throw them off. That's okay. But that's why they hired me, because usually, I'm bringing something different to the table. But in terms of results, if we're not equal in terms of all of our access to resources and equipment, then I'm at a disadvantage. That should never happen. And then if they're looking to, like, sometimes this has happened, I'll be told by, a supervisor, I need you to go and see what the competition is doing so that we can see what they're after. Okay, I'm going to tell you what the competition is doing if they're doing better, but then you're going to give me the same resources that the competition has as well.
Right. Like, oh, they have this. Right. I think that our job would be better if we all had better, faster internet or something like that.
That's right. Because, let's look at you want extraordinary results. I need extraordinary tools and equipment, just the same way. And let me say another thing. A big part of the work that I do now is in recruiting and helping, these underrepresented groups to join the organization that I'm recruiting for. And I see so many parallels with the way that I recruit these special populations with the way that I used to do recruiting on the executive search side. It's the same. It's the same, and they should be treated the same. You talk to anybody who works in executive search, first of all, their rec load is nowhere near the same, right? They don't have like 100 jobs that they got to fill. No, it's high volume. No, they don't. It's not the number. It's the quality. Why? Because I'm hiring a VP, a president, a CHRO. They're making hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So I only need to place one every few months, and I've made my bank. So I'm going to treat that person, right, accordingly. Kid gloves. I'm going to baby them. I'm going to provide them with white glove treatment. Mm-hmm. And if we are the rare commodity that they're saying that we are, Black women in tech, right? Veterans, people with disabilities. Oh, we can't find them. We're looking for them. It's difficult. I can't find a bilingual Latinx person to do my data analytics. Really? You can't find them, or you're not trying? to present them with an offer that they can accept.
And also, you're not also, like you said, you're not selling them on why they should come to you anyway. Because like you said, like,
dazzle a sister.
Yeah,
okay?
Like dazzle that person. Like, right. Hey, we know you have these extraordinary talents, or we need someone that's bilingual. But then we also they'll say, what if you can't answer what's
the salary?
What's the salary for me?
What are the benefits?
What equipment? What team do I have to build off of this?
What team do I have to support me? Am I going to be burnt out in 5 minutes because you got me doing 2 or 3 jobs? Yeah. Right. Let's talk about that. That is really something that I'm seeing right now that's happening. The people that are winning that talent, that top level talent, are providing top tier level treatment.
Yeah. They're selling them. I got it. So this is a great episode. I don't know that we probably could do a part 2.
We probably could. Yeah.
So I'm at the part of the show called Shot for Shot.
Okay.
You get to ask me any random question. I get to ask you any random question. Ooh. You want to go first? I'll go first.
Okay. You go first.
All right. So I know you like to, you have an extraordinary skill to write. It's kind of a 2-parter. Okay. If there's a pre-existing magazine that you wish you could write for, what would it be? Or if you could make your own magazine, what would be the topic? And I say, I'll give you the timeline. It's a monthly magazine. You compile things every month on anything. And it is your content. And I mean magazine, like old school, you get the real hard copy and print and pictures and everything. And it's in the stores. People can pick it up, that kind of thing.
Oh, wow. Well, I would definitely want to have something that's like a cross between... Well, it would have to be called CareerWise Solutions Magazine. Okay. That, it would have to be branded for me, but it would talk about just like what we talked about, helping DE&I, populations, helping them to be recruited in a way that is, appreciative and mindful of the gifts and talents that they bring and perspectives that they bring. And also on the job seeker side, just kind of helping them to provide the best, avenues for themselves and how they can promote themselves and advocate for themselves. So yeah, it would talk about all of that and then feature, some of our prominent, people so that we can know that it's happening, so that we know of each other, so we can be inspired by each other, seeing them doing all their work in various places. I'm tired of seeing, people working in Bali and, all types of areas, California, Florida, on beaches, and they don't all look like us. They should look like us. Okay. Just as much as they look like, anybody else. They should have all different abilities. They should be all different age groups. They should be all different sizes, right? So just diversity in all its forms and fashion.
So it have like stories and highlights and organizations and a job posting part and a section. And all right, that sounds good. I like storytelling magazines. All right, it's dope. Love it. All right, that'd be cool.
Okay, so my question for you is, what made you start this podcast? How did you and what did you choose Positive Filter?
All right. Well,
that name.
This is a story. I definitely gotten quicker with the elevator pitch of it. But so back in the day, about 5 years ago, I was at a job that wasn't so fulfilling. So what I would do is I would get in my car and record videos to myself. I'd call them Random Ramblings of Philip Wilkerson, which if you go on YouTube, they're still there. And
I'm definitely looking it up.
Random Ramblings of Philip Wilkerson. It's like the only thing that would be Random Ramblings that would come up. And I would just do little blurbs, little motivational things to myself and topics. And then I realized that show was boring because it was just me in my car. So I said, hey, how do you start a podcast? What is it? So I reached out to my network, and one of my good friends, Sam Nang, said, hey, I got a guy named Dean Picari that has a podcast. Hit him up. And I didn't know what a podcast was. I never heard of it. I didn't even subscribe to him. And so he talked to me for about an hour, told me how to start one. He said it was like your own radio show. I said, that's even awesome because I'm tired of just sitting in my car and it'd be easier to just do audio. So I did that and I was like, okay. And then literally once again, I said, if I was supposed to have a podcast, what would I call it? And before this, I was doing a thing called the Ill Phil Awards. I was studying well-being. I was just being nice and I liked talking about positivity. So I had the Facebook thread and people would just give me suggestions. And shout out to my friend Kate Kavanaugh. She said, how about Positive Filter? I said, okay, got it. Don't trademark that, Joan. That's my name. And that was it.
Love it.
It was me soliciting my friends and what they thought about me and what my name was. So obviously my name is Philip Filter, kind of play on words. And it was my extension of my friends and family that came up with that name. So it was more so like randomly, like, randomly doing something to motivate myself with the videos in my car, to turn it into an audio show, to really being consistent with it and turn it into a real podcast. Beautiful. So that's kind of my origin story, which was over 5 years ago.
Beautiful platform.
Yeah.
I don't believe in random. I don't. So I'm glad that you called it something that was not using the word random. I do believe that there's purpose in everything. And even if we're not able to see the design, something else is putting that in your space.
I don't know. I just like talking to people. And then as my podcast, was the interviews, like me talking to myself in the car, I said, this is boring. I need to change my podcast format to interviewing people. And so very early on, I did like one episode. I was like, nah. I had my best friend on my first episode, Hillard, and we changed it to interview style. And it was basically, this is a living journal. I get to just ask people questions and listen and really learn honestly, I told people this joke for those that want to start a podcast. I said, do something that you would listen to that gives you value, and don't worry about the audience.
Yes.
Because if I'm so interested in this subject, I'm asking questions about remote work.
Yes.
I'm not being narcissistic. Maybe somewhere out there, someone is interested in that same topic.
Love it. I love it. That's how I got into recruiting. I wanted to be the recruiter I didn't see.
Yeah. So I just ask questions that I want to know. And maybe someone has value add that, oh, wow, I'm glad Philip asked that question.
Yes.
The person, Floor, provided me with an answer I always wanted to know.
Yes.
So that was it. Like, my interview style is interviewing people and asking thoughtful questions of things I would like to know that would be thoughtful. And also, I think, add value to other people that listen to my show.
Love it.
That's pretty cool.
Clear. Yeah.
Yeah. It's got better over time. That's it. Now I do one shot for shot.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
perfect.
I'm not gonna crush you. So,
okay. Good.
So this is the part of the show I call shout outs and plugs. So obviously, please send me all the references and things that you want me. I make sure to put it in the show notes. But shout outs, show love to anyone you want to show love to. Yes. Don't matter. Shout outs and then plugs. These are ways that the listeners can engage with you, follow up with you, and also understand what you're doing. So the stage is set. Shout outs and plugs.
Okay. Shout out to Nabil Moulin. He is the executive director, I think, for Jersey STEM, which is the group that I am a part of. I'm doing some consulting work for them, helping them to recruit and to work on their girls clubs. So I will send you the link to Jersey STEM if people want to find out about that and how to be involved. Shout out to Carrie Miller Ortiz. She's head of people, as I said, for Move United, affiliated with the Paralympics games, and is spreading recreational opportunities for people of all abilities. So I will definitely send you, and I've been consulting with her. I'm just trying to develop her outreach again on the college career side. Let's see. As far as a plug for myself, you can find out more about what I do on www.career, and then it's wise with a Z, WIZE solutions.com. That's my website. You can also see information about me on my LinkedIn page, which is Floor Dorsley Moore. So if you do Floor Dorsley, I'm the only Floor Dorsley Moore, I believe, on LinkedIn. And I also have a Twitter feed. So when I post on LinkedIn, I also usually tweet, and it's at F Dorsley, because I did that before I got married. So, so that's been out there for a while. So that's how you can find out more about me and what I do.
Excellent. And I will add all those links and things to the show notes, but also please send it to me because you know how my brain works. But thank you so much. This has been a great episode. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Family and friends, Positive Filter listeners, please share this episode with your family and friends. Sharing positivity is a movement. If you have any questions or want to get featured on the podcast, send a voicemail to 571-336-6560. That's 571-336-6560. Sometimes I take the audio of those voicemails and embed them in the episodes, as well as connect. Follow Positive Filter, give a like, a subscribe, a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Sharing positivity is a movement. Thank you so much, and we're out. Thank you for listening to Positive Filter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity a Movement. Thanks for listening.